Come on and shine, shine, shine. Las Vegas, shine your light on me.
Welcome to Las Vegas Tonight. Join award-winning host Dale Davidson as he interviews the most remarkable people you'll find in the entertainment capital of the world. You'll meet entertainers, sports figures, newsmakers, community and business leaders, and people just like you with stories that'll touch your heart. Now, here's Dale Davidson.
Welcome to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. Each and every week we come from fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, as you can see, and we try to bring you the fascinating, wonderful guests, and we've outdone ourselves this time. Dr. John Manoli is with us. Dr. Manoli is a wonderful person. He's a Christian gentleman. We're going to talk about that as we go on. He's a plastic surgeon. He does ear, nose, and throat surgeries as well, right? And he's a very accomplished gentleman and pretty handsome, ladies, for a single guy. That's all that they want to know, you know. But anyway, Dr. John, thank you for coming.
Very nice to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate it very much. Let me brag on you just a little bit. Put my glasses on here. Dr. Minoli completed 2 surgical residencies, 2 fellowships, 4 board certifications, over 10 years of formal postdoctoral training in surgery, in general, head and neck, facial, plastic, nasoplastic, and all host of other advanced surgical procedures. He's board certified by the National Board of Medical Examiners, and on and on and on. What a guy. What a guy. Plus, he has a great heart. Tell us a little bit about Dr. John growing up.
Well, Dale, thank you very much for the introduction.
You bet.
It's a long pathway, but it starts somewhere. And it started, for me, with my family and stories in my family about my forebears. My great-grandfather was a doctor who came from Italy to the United States. And so we'd hear stories as children about what our great-grandfather did, taking care of likely a lot of immigrants from that class, and also people who were native to the area. And the stories were dramatic. Obstetrics performed in the home, an appendectomy emergency performed in an emergency setting outside of a hospital. So this imbued me with a sense that there was something interesting, fascinating, something that came from my family.
Right.
And early on I had the idea I wanted to do something in medicine. Oddly enough, my mother still has a copy of it, but when I was learning how to write, our teacher gave us an assignment. What would you like to do when you grow up? So I still have it to this day. When I grow up, this is 2nd grade, I think. When I grow up, in cursive, as I was learning, when I grow up, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor-surgeon because they help people from dying. And I actually had a stick figure illustration of a surgeon at an operating table operating on a patient. It was interesting. When I was a boy, that was around the time that some interesting work was being done in cardiothoracic surgery. The first heart transplant happened in 1967.
Wow.
I was a boy at the time, but I was fascinated that something like that could happen. And I realized at that stage that's something I wanted to pursue.
Now, were you encouraged by your parents to do this?
Totally.
Yeah. They thought it was a great idea.
Because it was in the family. We had a number of doctors in our family for generations.
Okay.
There was this sense, this is something you may be interested in. You're going to have to study hard for this. There are scholastics involved, but this is doable. And look at some of your uncles and your grandfathers.
Sure.
So my brother's a dentist.
Oh,
as well
okay.
as he's 1 year older. We were in tandem going to school, really studying our pre-medical and pre-dental studies, even when we got to college. I went to a Jesuit school for college in New York City, Fordham University. Probably best known because Vince Lombardi went there and played football there.
Yeah, he coached there
yes,
too.
Yes, for a while.
Yeah.
That was really just part of the matrix of my background growing up. I did develop an interest in the theater. And so for a time I thought there might be some intrigue and involvement.
You got
in
the
that,
look. You're a handsome
but-
fella.
Thank you. But I ultimately decided that it was more substantial to pursue something which was one-on-one and which used mental faculties, physical faculties, good dexterous skills, and a sense of compassion too.
Sure.
And so through time, I sort of steered more toward the academic and the medical
But you liked
side.
acting and you sing
I love,
as well.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
I'd like to sing in the shower now.
There you go.
Anyone who will listen, I drive long distances alone, and I'll have Sinatra on in the background.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Now, you were in Brooklyn. Is that where you grew up?
I grew up in Brooklyn,
Okay.
Bay Ridge section and Diker Heights section
Oh,
of
yeah.
Brooklyn.
I know where that is. Yeah.
Now famous today because at Christmas time, all over the country, they'll televise the Diker Heights Christmas lights neighborhood, which has now become well known at that time of year. But
Right.
this was my neighborhood where I grew up.
And
We
that's
had
it.
no knowledge.
Every house
of it.
decorates and all of
Everyone
that.
was very colorful
Yeah,
about that.
yeah.
Christmas was just one of the greatest seasons in that neighborhood anyway.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Especially being a child there.
Sure.
It's interesting how things happen early in childhood. A very good friend of mine, still a good friend, we were in tandem too. We would play child's play games in the schoolyard, but we stayed close. Mm-hmm. He's now a pediatric neurosurgeon.
Is that right?
And because I went into plastic and reconstructive surgery, he politely, and he gets to do this, he refers to me as a plastician. A neurosurgeon can do that to a plastic surgeon,
that's
I suppose.
funny.
But that was part of the milieu of
Yeah.
my neighborhood background. People with some medicine in their family, they would instill that interest, and one family to another, we were well aware of who were the medical families in the community. Yes.
Really? And this was a special high school?
Oh, I went to a prep school in
Prep
Brooklyn.
school. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even in the neighborhood, though,
Yeah.
there were a lot of doctors in the neighborhood. We all
Really?
knew the doctors' families. Yeah. Often we would see someone out of that family was starting to study pre-medicine, so it was not an unnatural thing.
Yeah.
But what started to help things develop more were things such as volunteer work that I began to do.
What kind of
we were
work
in
did
college.
you do then?
Well, I worked in the hospital. Actually, I started working in a hospital setting in when I was 13 years old.
Really?
And oddly enough, this was interesting now that I think about it. My father was working in Manhattan. My brother was old enough to get his working card, so he was an office boy
Right.
for my father. It was at Columbus Circle in New York City.
Oh, yeah, I know
But
Columbus
I was
Circle.
too young. I
Yeah.
was too young to get my card. So my dad said, come, there's a hospital one block down. Turned out to be the very famous St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital.
Right.
And I went to the volunteer department, and they said, you'll wheel wheelchairs around there. But here was the odd thing about it. Their big claim in the volunteer department was that Ethel Merman was doing volunteer work and
Is that right?
and
I
wheeling
didn't know
wheelchairs
that.
around. So
I didn't know
Ethel
she did
Merman
that.
was one of my great inspirations to go into medicine, I guess I can
That's
say. in a way.
great. That's great.
So I became proficient at wheeling wheelchairs around the hospital, but it introduced me to the hospital setting. Not only sick people, but the practitioners around who were very engaged in very disciplined ways in treating them. And I saw all branches of medicine from a little bit of a young person's distance.
Had to get you started in the whole
Somewhere.
idea of it. Yeah.
My neighbor, just a wonderful man, he was a colorectal surgeon, Dr. Martin Marino, who later became president of the American Colorectal Society. He knew I had interest, and in high school he invited me to the operating room
Really?
and took me around from one surgeon to another. He was well recognized at the hospital, so he was able to do this, and I was very honored and saw amazing things that day. Now I come to see them as routine for my day, but when it first happened, I had searing images of human anatomy. It was beautiful.
Yeah, and it reinforced your desire right from go.
To see the actual not read about it, to see the events going on, and particularly the operating room was exciting to me.
Wow.
When I got off to college, I did some volunteer work with some learning disabled and brain injured children.
Yeah, I heard about that. Tell me more about that and why you got involved with treating kids who had these kind of issues.
Well, I was interested in medicine, of course, at that time, and I thought it would be good to work in a summer setting. I was a lifeguard at some stages in my late teens.
You and Ronald Reagan.
Well, I guess he was. My brother shares a birthday with Ronald Reagan.
Is that right? Yeah. One of my heroes. Yeah.
He's a great man. Yes, that's right. I remember pictures of Ronald Reagan in his lifeguard outfit.
Yeah.
But I would lifeguard. I used to teach swim lessons and tennis lessons in this community. And I got to the stage where I thought, I want to be doing some more work that somehow relates to health and human services. And our neighboring family, the Marino family that had been involved with colorectal surgery, said there is this camp for brain-injured children. Turned out to be a camp really for autistic children.
Right.
And years before the movie Rain Man came out, I had direct knowledge in working with autistic children.
That's
it was
early.
More,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was fascinating to see the incredible intellectual powers some of these children had, and yet at the same time, they had social withdrawal too.
Yes.
So it was, heartfelt working with them to see that they had such skills but such deficiencies. And the whole time we worked, we were trying to have them experience happiness, joy, camp setting. So we did camp-related things. It was that wonderful human side. It had less to do with strict medicine and more to do with just camaraderie with a group that needed some counseling.
Yes.
And from there, I eventually started to do more work in research laboratories in college, and was introduced to some high-level research thinkers. It showed me that there was a scientific part to it as well, and eventually I was lucky enough to get into medical school.
That's wonderful. I remember you talk about the autistic kids and brain-injured kids. I was happened to be one of the founding coaches of the Challenger Little League, which is exactly that. And my son and I, my eldest son and I, co-coached one of the first teams. So because we didn't have enough kids in any age group, they were from 8 to 18 on one team. So that was interesting. But we loved it, and the kids were so terrific. I just loved them. There were autistic kids and blind kids and brain-injured kids and everything imaginable. And I just treated them, I remember talking to one of the parents, I just treated them the way I would kids, no matter what, making allowances for their skills. And I asked one of the parents, and they said, "You're doing it exactly right. Treat them like they're just kids." And it was such a wonderful experience for me.
I have to say, just listening to what you just said and remembering my experience, there's a humbling aspect to that kind of work. And there's a sense, I got at least, of real simple joy watching these children who had such restrictions find happiness in the smallest of things. And it reminded me, sometimes we make life a little too complex.
We do. Yeah.
Happiness can come from simplicity. And that was one of the things they taught me some too.
Oh, I learned so much more than I think I taught them. And you talk about joy. Both teams, it didn't matter who scored a run, everybody cheered. And I remember after, I think it was 3 or 4 years of coaching, I was going to move up here. And so I brought in a friend of mine who was actually a butcher at a local grocery store. He wanted to coach. So I wanted to kind of step back and let the kids get used to him being the coach. So I took a walk around from one of our fields to one of theirs. And everybody was cheering and loving each other and helping each other. and there was this gigantic fight going on with the parents yelling at each other in Little League. And I said, see, this is the way it was supposed to be for everybody.
Sometimes the little ones, they teach the older ones.
Don't they? Don't they? It's
in the simplest of ways,
That's
too.
it. That's true. We're going to need to take a little break. We'll be back with the wonderful Dr. John Manoli right after these messages.
Potential audience of more than 50 million people is reached every week by Las Vegas Tonight. To keep the important message of Christ's love on the air, we need your prayers and financial blessings. Please send your tax-deductible gift to Dale Davidson Ministries, 9030 West Sahara Avenue, number 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. For a donation of $25 or more, we'll send you a copy of Dale Davidson's new book, Las Vegas Tonight, From Sin City to Vegas Saints. You'll love these inspiring stories of Las Vegas Christians who are changing the world. Or donate to the ministry, or order Dale's book by going to vegassaints.org. That's vegassaints.org. Or call us today at 702-480-3989. That's 480-3989. God bless you.
Welcome back to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. We're really enjoying Dr. John Manoli, who's a plastic surgeon. He does all kinds of surgery, obviously has a great heart. We've been calling him Dr. John with the big heart, which is it's an unusual thing for an accomplished surgeon like yourself to be so down to earth. And I think that really says something good about your personal faith, your upbringing, your character. They should all have your bedside manner.
Well, Dale, thank you. It's every day we have to remind ourselves to get back in the driver's seat and do exactly that. I'm always trying to find ways to put myself in the shoes of patients that I'm talking to and listen to their problems. And through years of doing that, it's sort of leveled me. Not to get too high with anything. We all go through periods in our lives, and when I was young and maybe feeling a little proud, life teaches you lessons. And humility goes a long way because it shows us oftentimes the truth more. The quiet ways. It's the loud noises don't necessarily bring the answers sometimes. It's quiet contemplation. It's interesting, since we're talking about such things, contemplation and prayer, I became interested in a particular aspect of Christ going to pray by himself in the desert. And I've thought about prayer a lot. Now, from a medical standpoint, having some understanding of anatomy, I began to understand that the prayer was, in some ways, really divine meditation. And it called into play our anatomical centers, the energy centers that are in us, low down to high up to the brain. And to the third eye, which opens up to the Christ. And so having some knowledge of anatomy sort of imbued my stages of prayer. I would think about literally what's happening anatomically to my body as I'm in the process of prayer.
That's very interesting.
How that opens up perception of like the divine creator in my life. And I take that with me quietly through every day.
Yeah, and the Bible says we should pray without ceasing, which I take to mean talk to God all day long,
I like that phrase, having a conversation with God. And it's almost as if one can keep a diary with oneself and you're talking to God.
Yes.
I love that aspect. If it's a constant conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing about Jesus was he would go up on the mountain, or he would get away from his disciples, and he would say, I have to go speak to the Father. And he did it multiple times in the Bible, probably did it multiple times every week. He needed to get away, and I think that what you call divine contemplation, which I like very much, that's what he was doing, I think, huh?
I got an inspiration somehow that what does it mean to pray? I would read, I've been introduced as a boy, Christ did exactly that, went by himself to gather himself to pray. And I started to become more of an adult and then piece my spiritual life with my very specific scientific life. How do I square the circle?
Yeah, sure.
And then I began to put myself, well, this is my anatomy. Even Christ had an anatomy. He had to use his faculties. And it was through these centers I felt there had to be something with using our higher centers, and that could be part of my daily conversations. I wanted to have this part of my brain opened up for perceptual understanding.
And I've read that there have been experiments where people have prayed for patients in the hospital, a group, and then there was a control group that weren't prayed for, and those that were prayed for were better.
Oh, the power of prayer that's been shown over and over again. There's something, of course, mysterious about it.
It is.
But it works. See, it's such an interesting topic for me because it's divine, it's spiritual, but it's so anatomic and it's so scientific. When I look at healing, to this day, I've been practicing surgery for decades now, and I'm still amazed at the power of healing. Where does it come from? Who's responsible? It's the Christ. It's the Godhead. That's where the power of the healing comes from.
Right.
And it's just, I see miracles in small ways every day. How did that wound heal like that?
Yes, yes.
So I'm constantly making scientific observations, but it's from the standpoint of a spiritual essence, really.
That's very interesting because scientists, which is what you are, it's imbued in you. It's your training is scientific, and everything needs to be proved in the lab or with experimentation. So many scientists, many doctors have become atheists because of that reason, and others have become very religious people. So tell me a little bit about that.
That is a fascinating thing to bring up because, yes, there's a fork in the road. There's a scientific method, that which can be proven or demonstrated or observed. I chose at a certain point early on to recognize that it's the hand of the Lord working. My understanding of scientific things is just, I have a chance now through those studies to appreciate God from a different standpoint.
That's wonderful.
It's even more mysterious. Oh, there's his power there. It really is. I don't necessarily, I think this is true. Einstein, the massive brain that he was,
right,
would talk about that too. His gift to be able to see God's brilliance.
His thought experiment. Yeah.
So that's the way I choose to see the scientific method. This is just, I'm observing another reflection of God.
Yeah, I have a brand new granddaughter. She's only 6 weeks old. And I look at her and I look at her breathing, I hold her, and she's just perfect in every way. And I, is she breathing? This kind of thing. And I want to say to myself, how could such a wonderful thing, person, human, be created without God? How could you believe that that is an accident? I once read where a mathematician said the odds, yeah, you've probably heard it.
Brilliant. No,
Yeah,
please.
The one that he, there were several different examples, but the one I like the best is the odds of everything happening by accident are roughly the same as a tornado going through a junkyard and spitting out a brand new Cadillac. You know, the odds are just phenomenal. And there are other ones too that.
No, I liked
yeah.
that concept. There was the mathematical analysis of what's the possibility that all of this can happen. And it was just shown, it's just so extremely impossible if there weren't a divine intelligence behind things.
Sure, sure.
So, you know, to me, that's just yet another example.
Sure. And in the Bible as well, others have done the mathematics, but there are, in the Old Testament, among the prophets, prophecies about Jesus hundreds of years before they took place. Exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And they say the odds were, you know, 10th to the 100th power that, you know, all of those things could come true. Mm-hmm. And that to me is more proof within itself, within the scripture itself, that there is indeed a creator.
My grandmother, pithy and right down to common living, would say something that encapsulates how you choose to view life, which way you can go, one way or the other. She would say, if you look for a hair in the egg, you'll find it.
That says it all, doesn't it?
If you want to believe that this is just abstract and it's just by virtue of random events happening, go for it.
Yeah.
You just look enough, you can see it all over. It's just a matter of your perspective, how you choose to view things. You can shut the light off like that, you know, and that's the one thing for all of us that have a spiritual essence and believers. You have to practice it in some ways, even if it's quiet every day, to remind yourself, because you could fall off the cliff.
Yeah, you could, yeah.
And then get saved again, maybe.
Yeah, possibly. You know, you never know when you hear about medical miracles. And it always seems like the Lord can give you a naturalistic explanation for something, so you have to choose. You know, I saw one on YouTube not long ago where a doctor, emergency room doc, and he, you know, lost a patient and left the room and was heading, you know, down to his office or wherever he was going. And he just felt, and he's a Christian, and he just felt the Lord was saying, go back there and pray for him. Pray for him. And so he went back and prayed for him, and everybody was cleaning up, you know, in the emergency room saying, what are you doing? He said, I'm just supposed to pray for him, which he did. He just prayed, laid hands on him 10 minutes, and he came to. And you wonder, and he's happy to talk about it, which there's probably some peer pressure not to, huh?
You know, I suppose it's like politics these days in this country. You have your own beliefs, and if they're strong, and for me, they're there. There will be naysayers.
There always are.
There always are. But that's all the more reason to remind yourself, and you may, as a result, wind up being an example you don't even know for somebody who is not a believer, who comes to see maybe through your words or actions you don't even know what kind of effect you're having on a person, but you do.
Yes. And you are right now. We know that millions of people watch the program in various formats, and many are not believers. Many are overseas. Many have never heard about Jesus. And yet we get letters, we get emails, you know, thank you for saying this. And, you know, there's probably doctors out there now saying, you know, he's right. You know, I've seen other things like this, you know.
It'll help their medicine and their practice of medicine, too. When I was a boy, I do remember this now that we're talking. And I was raised as a Catholic, but I have a Christian attitude about things in New York, WPIX, Channel 11.
Right.
It was later at night. The folks had gone to bed. I wasn't even a teenager, I think, maybe close to being a teenager. Right. And Billy Graham crusades would come through.
Yes.
And I'd flip on the TV. And I don't know what it was, but there was something about that man's voice that just grabbed you. And I could listen to him for an hour.
I know, me too. Yeah, he's one of my heroes, one of my life heroes.
It was interesting to me because I grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly one group. We were a Catholic neighborhood, but here was this Christian who was from a Protestant group, and he had so much to say to me.
Yeah.
And the way he said it, he just grabbed people with his voice, and in a way, that was it. He'd never met me,
Yeah.
but he grabbed me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's remarkable how many people have come to Christ because of Billy Graham. And when he had the famous first crusade at Madison Square Garden in 1957, he had members of the clergy from every possible denomination, including Jewish were up. The Jewish rabbis were there, and the bishop was there, and everybody was there. He's a very inclusive kind of person, and never really said, you know, this denomination is better than another, or this belief is, hey, come to Christ, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, here's why. You know, it was very simple when it comes down to it.
Peaceful coexistence.
Yeah.
And tolerance, too.
Yeah, that's the answer. And when we come back, I want to talk a little, you mentioned politics. I want to talk a little bit about the divide of our nation. And we don't have to get into, you know, specifics with, you know, who we favor, but I think it's a serious problem. It needs to be addressed.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
We'll be back with Dr. John Manoli and a fascinating conversation right after these messages. You have a dream. A dream to start a nonprofit organization. You're ready to go, but the 501c3 application process looks daunting. You need someone who is experienced. Someone you can trust, someone to guide you at every step. Only a phone call away. Dreams meet 501c3 Go. Everything you need to successfully get through the 501c3 process. Incorporation, plus your 501c3. Ongoing consultation, final IRS approval. A Harvard lawyer, fast turnaround. You're ready to go. So, go to 501c3go.com. For a $100 discount, use the code VEGAS. To speak directly to an attorney at no charge, call 800-293-7490. That's 1-800-293-7490. Again, that's 501c3go.com. Let's go. Welcome back to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. Dr. John Manoli is our guest. We've been asking him tough questions, and he answers them, which is always a pleasure when you have a guest like that. But he's a smart fella, as you can tell. On My Vegas magazine, the subhead says, Best Surgeons in Vegas Unite, the Smith Plastic Surgery Group. And he's 1/3 of that group. Tell us about your partners.
Oh, wonderful men. Dr. Smith has real vision, and he really commandeered the creation of a beautiful new place that's a surgery center and a spa with overnight care. He's a Mayo Clinic graduate, so he brings some of that with him. It turns out that one of the reasons we got together is that he and I are the only two surgeons in the state that are board certified in ear, nose, and throat surgery, facial plastic surgery, and general plastic surgery. And we came to know each other at a plastic surgery dinner turned out we had a lot of common interests and ideas.
Uh-huh.
And through time, it became more obvious that we should merge and combine our efforts. And then along the way, our third partner, Dr. Mint, is a wonderful specialist who has great skill with eyelid work, and he's lectured all over the world. So what has been happening now, this is recent, our merging, is we have very experienced surgeons all under one roof, not competing. That's a real thing, unfortunately, in some of the medical subspecialties. We're supposed to be for the greater good of the populace, and unfortunately there can be too much of a sense of competition you don't necessarily
Most
always
professions
see.
you find that,
You don't always see the collegial behavior that you would expect to. But this has been beautiful. We're combining our efforts. We have a chance to share ideas with each other, and that propels us along to better work.
Sure.
So kudos to my partners, Dr. Lane Smith and Dr. Schwabe Mint.
That's great, and I'll hold that up again. It's really something to be on the cover of My Vegas magazine. Not everybody has that kind of an honor, and we're really pleased to have you because of that. Let me ask you a couple of questions about plastic surgery, and maybe you can agree or debunk or whatever you want to do. The psychology of plastic surgery is interesting to me. People, if it's not facial reconstruction from an accident or something like that, if it's primarily cosmetic, what is the psychology that would bring a man or a woman, and tell me what the split is between the sexes, to your office?
Well, in a lot of cases, it's a sense of wanting to feel whole. With regard to gender, classically, more women come into our practice and practices around the country, but we're seeing changes now. Men are beginning to see they can do things for themselves and feel good about themselves. And so probably 20% at least of our patients in elective practice for plastic surgery are men.
Sure.
It's an interesting aspect to consider what some people would consider vanity as opposed to the combination of science and aesthetics. And I think most people watching are aware of things that are overdone, even shows on television that talk about excesses of surgery, and that exists. So I see my role as helping to guide patients to see where something is plausible, can be done, can help improve their lives, and where it's out of bounds, it's not realistic. It's been said in our field that plastic surgeons are psychiatrists with knives.
I'll bet that's interesting. That's interesting because
it's fascinating.
It has to be,
And it has to be part of the analysis of each patient. How will they tolerate potentially a given surgery mentally as well? They have to be prepared for it. And our society propels imagery.
Yes.
It's part of merchandising and commercialism and sales. And as a consequence,
celebrity-laden,
yeah,
society we live in.
Demigods or sacred golden calves. Aaron's golden calf, so to speak. That's what I talk to myself about. That there's another golden calf out there. But having a sense of wholeness and feeling good about oneself is good. I've taken care of patients that were withdrawn and come out of their shell as a result. So where's the vanity in that? I began years ago to think about, in a way, the ridiculousness of what I used to hear. Oh, we don't want our child to have orthodontia work on their teeth because God made them this way. But then I think to myself, but God also made dentists. So where's the merging of the two? And I think the merging is a responsible application. Things are oftentimes not all or none. There are there's a bell curve, there's a gray zone,
Yeah,
if you
sure.
will, and it's that zone that we try to find the truth.
Sure, and you sound as though, and knowing you now, very much so a moderating influence on this sort of thing. I think it was a dramatic TV show I saw one time, and so tell me if there's any truth to this, because it's TV after all. But a beautiful woman, a model, right, was just gorgeous. And she kept going back to the plastic surgeon, asking for this, asking for that, saying, "Can't you see I have this mole here?" You know, that sort of thing. Does that happen? Do you actually run into that?
As a matter of fact, no, I'm a plastic surgeon, not a psychiatrist, but we have to be aware of psychiatric conditions. Very much so. As it is, probably 10% of the population suffers from body dysmorphic syndrome.
Oh, okay.
Now,
Tell me
is
about
that inherent in us, or is that something that's propelled from our reaction, some people's reaction to society and the pressures that are put to bear? We have to look this way. So-and-so is an attractive actor or actress.
Right.
There's a lot of peer pressure. But body dysmorphic syndrome, well, a good example of body dysmorphic syndrome would be an anorexic patient.
Yeah,
they
or
don't
bulimic.
see themselves, or a bulimic patient.
Right.
They don't see themselves as other people see them.
That's fascinating.
And even with an objective medical opinion, they still don't see the
They
truth.
look in the mirror and they see a
They
fat
may
person.
have a conditioned body, they see obesity when
Yeah.
it doesn't exist. That's just one example of body dysmorphic syndrome, but it's been calculated that probably 1 out of every 10 patients coming into a plastic surgeon's office has body dysmorphic syndrome. They don't see themselves realistically. They view plastic surgery as the magic wand, and it's not. It's a very rigid discipline with the application of surgical principles and healing that has to happen. And so patients have to see things realistically. So that's one of my roles, is to help guide them to see things realistically.
Well, God bless you for doing that, because I'm sure there'd be those that would take advantage of the situation, but you obviously have the professionalism and the heart not to do a thing like that.
It's oftentimes good practice not to operate.
Yeah.
And there are a number of patients I will guide them, you don't need my services here.
Right.
And I'll find them alternate services.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that becomes part of the analysis, and that's actually, I consider that in a way just as substantial a part of practice as the actual surgery itself, is choosing the right patients and having good candidates, and then guiding patients who are not candidates.
Yes. And it must be, very, very rewarding for you to operate on a baby that was born disfigured, or somebody disfigured in a car accident, and to bring them more of a sense of normalcy, because the shame and the trauma and you talk about psychological issues, boy, that you would just, I don't know how you would deal with that.
If I have just a little bit of time,
Sure.
I should share an interesting story about the history of plastic surgery in the modern world. There are examples of plastic surgery procedures that date back thousands of years, but modern plastic surgery really had a lot of its origin from the experiences in World War I. Trench warfare. Trench warfare produced injuries in the face, and patients came to be known as facial cripples. And the British government, during World War I, assigned certain doctors to look into this problem as a task force and see how they can,
what can we do?
How could they deal with this. So from that became the discipline of surgery regarding facial reconstruction from war injuries. And then within a little over 10 years, an actual board of plastic surgery was created out of that.
Okay.
But it really came from some of the original work to say, how can we put together an entirely disfigured face? And from that, the outbranching was, as surgeons became skilled at that, they started to look at the sub-zones of the face, the sub-aesthetic units of the face, and say, can we do things more electively with that?
Okay.
That was...
So it's a long history to plastic surgery,
It's a
which I
long
was
and
not aware of
fascinating
that.
history with a lot of innovation.
Yeah.
Some of real advances in medicine have been through plastic surgery.
Yeah, that's
In
remarkable.
fact, I think one of the original transplant surgeons had his background in plastic
Is
surgery
that right?
first, yes.
Yeah.
You know, that all needs to be baked into the mix. It's not just a technician performing a procedure, and that's one of the criticisms that I hear in our modern world. Some of the doctors will run patients through their clinics in sort of a one after the other fashion, almost
Right.
like a conveyor belt.
Right, yeah.
And I just think the patient loses something out of that, and the doctor loses something out of that too, because they don't get to practice the humanistic side of medicine. It becomes more of a technical exercise. There's nothing wrong with good technical expertise, but there has to be some heart behind it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because the next question I was going to ask you was exactly on that. Your personal faith informs your medical ethics, clearly.
I view it that way.
Yeah. And do you feel that having Christ in your heart makes you a better surgeon, a better doctor, a better person?
More compassionate.
Oh, okay.
More compassionate, I would say. And it's interesting, we were just talking about a story of a doctor that you knew about who basically was involved in a Lazarus type effect just by prayer.
Yes.
So I see great power in that. I even see that through that kind of pattern of practice of one's faith, that can bring inspiration about discoveries.
Sure.
And techniques and variations of what can be done in surgery. That's an inspiration too. That's a divine inspiration. Oh, we can make an incision that way now. That's
Right.
not just purely objective science.
Right.
That's inspired.
Yeah, there's art to this.
I
Yeah,
have
and inspired
actually,
from the Lord. Yeah.
I have talked about this for a long time. I was interested in the theater arts, performing arts at a time in my early life.
Yeah.
And I was interested in medicine, and I came to really view things as I do now. The healing arts are what they are. They're one of the art forms. In fact, it may be the highest art form, even though in our culture we give great credence to entertainers.
Yeah, we sure do.
That's the art form.
Yeah.
And there's something wonderful about being entertained, but there's also something wonderful about being healed.
Oh, sure, sure. You know, and I've often thought, and I think it was an early pastor in my life as I was growing up in the Methodist church at the time, who said, if we compensated our professions based on what they do for people, number one should be teachers.
I
They
agree
should
with
be
that.
making the most money, and they're at the bottom, you know?
I agree with
which
that.
is crazy, but, you know, obviously doctors are very important, and other people that do this sort of work that you do, but yeah, we are a celebrity crazy society, you know? I mean, I can't think of another way to put it.
The arc of history is such that it swings in a pendulum, it seems.
It does, yeah.
And when
yeah.
things seem to get out of hand, they come back again. And throughout history, I'll just paraphrase Gandhi, actually. Throughout history, there have been times when someone who is of a nefarious nature seems to be all-powerful, seems to be all-convincing, seems to be unable to be defeated. But in every case, they fade. And as Gandhi would say, think about that. In every case.
Wow. But one.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but the divine one, of
Yeah,
course.
the divine one. But you're right, and we can't remember their names often. They were, yesterday's heroes. Say, what was the name of that movie star? Who? Yeah, and that's the same sort of thing. So it says something about the overall, length of our lives, what's important in life, and the value of having an important relationship, one-on-one relationship with Christ, which I think is crucial.
So do I.
Yeah, I know you do.
I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this with you.
Thank you. It's hard to believe it, Dr. John, the doctor with a heart, but we're almost out of time. So
It's been such
we
a pleasure.
appreciate Dr. John Manoli.
We'll continue the conversation.
Thank you. You're always invited to come back.
Thank you so much.
You are a wonderful guy. And I hope you all got that sense. He's a great, godly man. And speaking of God, I would like to say what we call the sinner's prayer, for the perhaps millions of people who don't know the Lord, and you just happen to tune in because there's an interesting, good-looking guy sitting here, and we're in front of the Strip, and it's, who knows why you watched, but we truly appreciate the fact that you are watching. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for all the wonderful blessings that you give us. I am a sinner, and for that I am sorry. I repent of my sin. Thank you, dear God, for walking with me, for helping me to recover from my sin, for showing me the right way to follow you. I so love you, I so appreciate you, and I want more than anything to walk like you. In your Son, Jesus' name, amen. If you prayed that prayer, we believe that you're born again. So we'd like you to find a Bible-believing church in your neighborhood and get yourself a Bible. I always recommend reading the Gospel of John first. I got a funny story about that, but we're out of time. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and thank you, John Manoli, again. God bless you, and as I try to say each and every show when I remember, please walk with Him. God bless.
From the story of Tommy Scott, a former gang enforcer turned Christian evangelist, to the Hookers for Jesus Outreach Ministry, to the heart-wrenching story of Arturo Martinez and his heroic act of forgiving the man who assaulted and murdered his wife and 10-year-old daughter. Las Vegas Tonight presents an extraordinary depiction of Las Vegas as a city of transformation, from Sin City to Vegas Saints. Las Vegas Tonight, from Sin City to Vegas Saints, a collection of true stories of transformation, people whose lives were transformed, and people who are now transforming the world.
Hello, I'm Dale Davidson. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Las Vegas Tonight. Allow me to take just a few moments to let you know how you can learn more about some of the fascinating guests that I've interviewed. My new book, Las Vegas Tonight, From Sin City to Vegas Saints, is now available around the world. In it, I profile amazing people who make Las Vegas something much more than just a place to party. These compelling stories often tell of people who came to Las Vegas for reasons much different than the innovative ministries they ended up leading right here in Sin City. Take, for example, Tommy Scott, known as Hitman to his fellow members of an infamous gang in South Central Los Angeles. Tommy was serving time in a Las Vegas jail and contemplating suicide when a couple of pastors visited him in the lockup and led him to Christ. Tommy immediately began studying the Word and has become an on-fire evangelist and Christian author. Then there's Annie Meadows. Annie began life in a rural part of Kentucky, increasingly was fascinated with the occult, and eventually became a full-fledged witch. Rejecting anything having to do with God, she angrily vowed never to attend church or have anything at all to do with religion. Then, like Tommy, she had an encounter with the living Christ and now travels the world as a gospel singer and writes Christian children's books. Pastor Chris Chappell was an avowed atheist who also wanted nothing to do with the Lord. He was a successful businessman who felt he surely didn't need Jesus. His wife and father-in-law convinced him to attend church, and he felt a stirring that made him investigate the Bible's claims. Telling the Lord that he needed answers to his objections, he found those answers in a supernatural way and is now leading a remarkable church, Casa de Luz, in what's called the Naked City, which is a neighborhood just off the famous Las Vegas Strip. This formerly crime-ridden area is now experiencing a remarkable turnaround, and his church is serving that community in amazing ways. Doc Jones traveled to Las Vegas from New York on a personal mission to make as much money as he could. A born entrepreneur, he started a photography business that specialized in taking pictures of groups of partiers at the hot nightclubs on the Strip. He then learned that by referring young guys to the city's strip clubs, he could pick up lots of cash from the club's owners. That evolved into sending young women who were wannabe strippers to these so-called gentlemen's clubs, and then he managed their careers. Eventually, he felt so empty and despondent that he too thought seriously of suicide. Hearing a sermon about the prodigal son caused him to dedicate his life to Christ. Now an exceptional musician and composer of gospel rap, hip-hop, and spoken word genres, he is helping change Las Vegas from a place where sin abounds to a city where grace abounds more. Pastor Clegg Seth was an aspiring actor and screenwriter in Hollywood and a strong Christian who wanted to make a real difference for Christ in the entertainment world. But the Lord called him to establish a crisis hotline for runaway teens who were coming to Hollywood to pursue their silver screen dreams. He then started halfway houses for men and women with substance abuse and other problems. He also helped set up a similar men's home in Las Vegas. At one point, he developed a gambling habit, but the Lord delivered him from that problem, and he now devotes his life to sharing Christ with men in prison, serving seniors in a church setting, along with visits to nursing homes and hospitals. He has continued his quest to influence Hollywood through a ministry called the Christian Studio. I personally really look up to Clegg Seth as a model of how a Christian should live and serve others. He truly is one of the Vegas saints. Read these stories and more in this 226-page book, Las Vegas Tonight, From Sin City to Vegas Saints. You can get your copy in several different ways. Go to my website, vegassaints.org, or order it on Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. It's just $15.99 plus shipping. For more information or to make a donation to Dale Davidson Ministries that will help us keep this program on the air, please call 702-480-3989. Or you can write to us at Dale Davidson Ministries, 9030 West Sahara, Suite 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. And thank you so much for watching Las Vegas Tonight.
You've been watching Las Vegas Tonight with Dale Davidson. Send your tax-deductible gifts to Dale Davidson Ministries, 9030 West Sahara Avenue, number 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. Or call 702-480-3989.